Happy Pride, and welcome to Reader Seeks Romance Channel's Romance Roundup, the #1 romance book recs talk show. I am Liz Donatelli.
And I'm Libby Kay, author of the new release When Sparks Fly, available now through Inkspell Publishing.
Throughout the month of June, Libby and I are chatting with authors of LGBTQ romances published in 2025. Today's guest is Joanna Lowell, author of Queer Enemies to Lovers historical romance, A Rare Find, releasing from Berkeley on June 10th. Watch Romance Roundup on Reader Seeks Romance Channel and subscribe on YouTube. Listen to Romance Roundup on PodBean and all podcast apps. Follow us on Instagram @LibbyKAuthor and @ReaderSeeksRomance. Hello, Joanna, and thank you for joining us from England today.
I am very happy to be here. It's very late at night, but I'm wide awake because of your amazing energy.
Well, that's great. We haven't even started.
The intro just woke me right up.
Are you in England for business or pleasure, or both?
Both, in a sense, because it's a pleasure to be here, but I'm teaching a class. I'm co-teaching a hybrid critical creative literary seminar called Literature of the Witch with a friend of mine. And so we're in a house in Hampstead with 12 students that are with us for the month to read some early modern literature and secondary sources on the witch hunts and the figure of the witch, and also some contemporary stories and poems and novels that sort of take up and transform that figure of a powerful women spelling, changing their worlds. So it's really fun.
Wow.
That's so cool.
That is incredibly cool. I went through a phase of reading books. I think Witch Craze was one of the first books I had read about the European witch hunts. And then, being from New York, we visited Salem, Massachusetts a few times and then absorbed, that information about, witch hunts in the US. So I'm fascinated by that.
It's so great. We had class this morning. We're reading The Tempest and Sylvia Federici's Caliban and the Witch. And then we're going to read I Tituba, Black Witch of Salem. And we're in this house by Hampstead Heath, which is known for witchiness. And there's a rose garden behind the house with a fox family. And the foxes come out to play between the roses. It's very magical.
Since June is Pride Month, are you doing anything special to celebrate?
My partner is here with me, which is really exciting. He's a historian, so he's hugely helpful and very collaborative in the writing process for these last two romance novels that I wrote. And the other day we walked along Regent's Canal, which runs through London. There are houseboats moored along the sides of the canal, and like more cascading roses and other plant life. And we walked along the canal and we went to Queer Britain and stopped in. There's an exhibit opening in a few days. We're going to go to that. There was a really terrible ruling that just got handed down in the UK, a really transphobic ruling. So we've been walking around like trans t-shirts and just sort of trying to be in the space with others, hoping there's going to be some gatherings and protest marches, which there have been periodically. And so just trying to be with other people in a time that feels really difficult for folks in the LGBTQ community, particularly trans and non-binary folks. So just being in a city, getting the good energy of people feeling joy and resisting and inhabiting who they are, regardless of whatever legislative evils are kind of happening in the UK and in the US. Just being out and about.
You have a new Queer Enemies to Lovers historical romance releasing June 10th, A Rare Find. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, I can. I can show it to you because I brought it to England because I got my copies and I was so excited.
Oh, it's such a great cover. It is such a great cover.
It is.
It's a really beautiful cover. Yeah, I'm really happy with it. It's set in the Regency period, unlike my previous romance novels, which were all set in the Victorian. So this is set in Jane Austen times, and it's a queer, star-crossed enemies to frenemies, to friends, to lovers, romance with an aspiring archaeologist and a kind of charming, rakish, ne'er-do-well actor, gadabout towner, neighbor, and the two of them have to team up on a search for Viking gold, and hijinks ensue. Sometimes the hijinks involve sheep. So it's set in it's set in rural, Derbyshire. So it's kind of as a cottage core plus, rural adventure vibe. So it's not, there's no like dark London, so which I like, and I've done in some of the earlier books, but this is sort of summer in the village, getting
Got it.
into
Nice.
having a queer awakening.
Awesome. Was finding Viking gold a thing in the Regency era? Was that something people were looking for? Or?
It was not.
Oh, okay. So that's creative
Yeah.
license.
No, no. So let me I can back up. The find that Elf, the heroine and the aspiring archaeologist, the she's trying to find proof of a Viking winter camp and proof of a Viking winter camp, like the great heathen army that was rampaging through the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. Archaeological proof of the location of a winter camp, people didn't find that proof until the 1980s. However, the period in which the book is set in the early 19th century, it was a time when the first archaeological societies were forming locally, and there was a really big I don't know if I would call it a craze, but there were a lot of wealthy men. They were usually wealthy, and they were usually men, not entirely, but wealthy men of antiquarian passions, antiquaries. They were obsessed with collecting artifacts and like discovering you know things about in antiquity. And there
Got
were
it.
many camps, and they had a lot of ideas about English national origin and English history. And so Elf in this book, she has a family of antiquaries. Her father is one of these guys. And there was a big royal society of antiquaries, and they would run around and break open ancient burial sites and often destroy things. Like modern archaeologists look back and are like, oh no. But this is the time when like Stonehenge is getting excavated. There's a lot of Anglo-Saxon graves that are getting buried, and also there are some finds that are from the Danes as well. So that's
Okay.
all sort of in the mix. But the obsession with like Vikings, they weren't called Vikings yet. They were still called like the Northmen. But the obsession with Vikings came later in the Victorian era. So Elf is a little bit precocious in her finding of this winter camp.
Everything you say is so fascinating, Joanna. I feel
I
smarter
know.
for having
I,
spoken to you each time.
I don't know. I was just thinking this is the thing that I do where I'm like, let me tell you about the history, where my editor is like, Stop, stop, romance." And I'm like, I just read this other thing about a burial mound. So anyway.
Maybe this is a good segue then to your question about
Yes.
craft,
Yeah.
Libby.
Yeah. Since you brought it up, could you tell us a little bit about your writing process, including what the research part of it looks like? Do you do all the research at the beginning, or do you kind of craft the story first? How do you approach writing a historical romance?
I always hear about people who write messy first drafts and like have placeholders for details. And I always think, wow, I wish that were me. That sounds amazing. Just like sitting down and just fluidly typing and typing and typing. And at the end of the day, you've written a chapter and you're like, yes. And you go on and then you go back and fill in the details. I am like, I know how to type, but I might as well just sit with one finger, just like because I'm so slow, because I'm like thinking and I'm like, I really don't know enough to write this sentence. And it's like the simplest sentence, but I'm like, I need to know that this sentence isn't somehow wrong because I don't understand some detail about the lived environment at this time. So then I'll go like read for an hour and I'll come back and I'll like type a little bit. So I do a lot of research as I go. And for me, that's also because I need to believe that the book is already a book as I'm writing it.
Okay.
I just need to have those details in place. And also, I think that details can kind of fill out the plot. Like some sort of detail is like,
Hmm.
oh wow, churches were like this. What if they go into a church and what if they find this? And what, so I find that some plot cues and dialogue sort of comes out of the research details. I have a university library and which is great. And so I could interlibrary loan lots of secondary, sources and some primary sources. And I have, access to various, academic journals, which are very helpful because it could be a synoptic kind of view of it.
Hmm.
Like I know it's peer reviewed and is like more trustworthy than like Wikipedia or whatever. So I do a lot of research as I go. I write very slowly. My first draft is my final draft,
Oh,
until editing. But that doesn't mean I've got it all right. It just means that when I have to like redo an entire third of the book because the pacing is off, or I really, it just means like hours and hours and hours of painstaking writing is out the window as opposed to like that sloppy first draft. But every book, I'm like, I will do this differently. And I never do. I just can't. I haven't been able to figure it out. I think part of it is I really enjoy the research and it takes a lot of it. Another thing that I do is I read novels from the period.
oh,
Um,
very cool.
yeah. And so, for every novel, historical romance I've written, there are novels from the period that the books are in conversation with. And this, is obviously because I said Jane Austen times, Jane Austen, but also Walter Scott. He has a book about an antiquary. It's making fun. This figure of the antiquary was so well known. It was a caricature at the time, like the pedantic older man with his study just he's under collapsing maps and Roman helmets and just like nonsensical trinkets that he's dug up from the dirt that are so that figure Scott makes fun of, and so I was reading Sir Walter Scott too, so it's sort of a mix of those things and then just
That's very cool.
happens very, very slowly.
So you kind of alluded to this because my follow-up question was, has your writing process changed since you've written so many books? Or has it pretty much been a consistent process since the beginning?
you know it's It's fair. I mean, it is fairly consistent. Something that I talk to my students about because I teach creative writing at a university is that the thing that I think I've learned more than anything else, more than like improving or sort of tinkering with my writing process, is that I'm more comfortable with discomfort at this point as a
Mm.
writer. Like that feeling that this is terrible, I should give up. This is completely doomed. I started on the wrong foot, and every subsequent step has been the wrong step. That kind of that. I mean, maybe some writers are different. Muriel Spark, great Scottish writer. Apparently, she just sat down and just like received dictation from God and like wrote these perfect novels. But like other than Muriel Spark, I think most writers feel a lot of doubt and uncertainty just throughout the process and not giving up and like not abandoning your idea or not abandoning a project because it's not going well. I think
Mhm.
that is something that I've kind of like learned how I don't shy away as quickly, so I don't have as many false starts, which is not to say if something's not working, you walk around the block, take a break, you might have to try a different approach for the scene or some aspect of the plot. But I just mean that thing of like being able to stay with bad feelings while
Yeah.
you write. I feel more comfortable with like, oh, this is just part of the process. Everything I've written, I've like hated for a substantial part of the writing process. This always happens. Um, but
That
yeah, that
actually makes me feel better because sometimes I feel that way too, where I'm like, this is trash. And I'm like, I'm not going to delete it. And then like a week later, I'm like, oh, I'm brilliant. I mean, I'm not, but you know.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, same thing. I feel like reminding yourself that you're probably not as terrible or as brilliant as you think. It's like I have to remind myself of like both of those things.
No, that's that's very accurate. Just out of curiosity, how long do you think it takes you to write a book? Like from starting it to hitting in the shelves?
Yeah, I mean, I usually have a year to turn in a historical romance,
Okay.
and it's interesting. Romance, I think, is a pretty fast genre. Like people turn. that people always talk about like, oh, that's a long, you've got like so much time, you've got these long contracts. I don't know. People have different writing speeds, obviously, and also like different, demands in their lives in
Hmm.
terms of family obligations and other job stuff. I mean, I'm a full-time professor and I'm also the editor of an independent experimental fiction press. So those things take up a lot of time. And then I'm also trying to write them. So I don't feel like that's a lot of time. I'm like in a
Yeah.
state of I have this deadline. And it's also, because I teach college students who pull all-nighters, as I also did as a college student. I can't pull an all-nighter with like a 400-page novel. It's like, but you have to have that like all-nighter urgency for like
Hmm.
300 days. Otherwise, you have like half of a book to write in a week.
Yeah.
I try to, but I have like a year turnaround, and I would feel way too anxious with less time than that.
Yeah, no, that I'm anxious just thinking about that with all the research you have to do. One last question, because I know we have some aspiring writers that listen to the show. Do you have any quick tips or something that you wish you knew earlier in your career that you could share with someone who's just getting started with writing, whether it's romance or historical romance?
I mean, I feel like it depends on what your goals are. So maybe it's to think about that too. Like, are you writing for yourself? Are you really writing because you want to crack some kind of like market? You really want traditional publication? Are you comfortable publishing independently? Because, a lot of the advice I have for people who just want to write is to take risks, to have fun, to do the things that you really feel passionate about and want to do, to give yourself little writing prompts. I like to give my students all sorts of constraints because I think that pressure of like, what do I write and waiting for the muse or what have you is like really daunting. But if
Hmm.
you have a bag of like cool nouns that you've written down and you pull out six and you're like, okay, I've got to start my book, but I have to use these six words in the first three sentences, it's like a game or it's like and you when you can kind of like feel that you're solving a problem or kind of like doing something that's paradoxically kind of like liberating because you have fewer options like
Yeah.
things like that I think are really fun for me just in terms of like waking up the imagination and um, trying out new things. If you're like, I want to publish my book traditionally, then I think trying to have a community of writers around you, kind of looking for particular writing groups. I mean, I think reading widely is great for, everyone, regardless of what your goals are as a writer. I think having a sense of what people are doing and feeling really just I feel really inspired by reading other people's books. I mean, intimidated, like, why
Yeah.
do I? But right, but also just like, this is so great. I can't believe this is happening on the page. I want to try something like this. And so I feel like Ursula Le Guin, who I really love, she as a rejoinder to this Harold Bloom's idea of the anxiety of influence, being like afraid of imitation. She countered that with the ecstasy of influence. Like maybe we can actually feel really excited that a lot of us are interested in the same things and borrowing from each other's work and playing with the same tropes. And so I really think sometimes people don't want to read because they're afraid it's going to like influence their style. But I just
Mhm.
think read as widely as possible and let all of those things sort of like percolate, metabolize them, and you'll make them your own.
I love the ecstasy of influence.
Uh-huh.
Interesting because we've talked to many an author who don't read within their own niche while they're writing because they're afraid of it influencing them. But I've never heard of the flip side of that, the ecstasy of influence. Now, on Romance Roundup, Joanna, we share romance book recs. Which LGBTQ books have you recently read and enjoyed or have added to your TBR list?
Okay. Here we go. Um, TJ Alexander's A Gentleman's Gentleman, Regency, Trans, amazing, so fun, highly recommend. Right before I left to come to London to teach, I read the last installment in a series by Alexis Hall. There are these short novellas, something fabulous, something
Mhm.
spectacular.
Hmm.
Forget what the third one is. It something extraordinary? It's so good. The pair that get the happily ever after are not romantic partners, and it's just so refreshing and so inspiring. Also, I'm reading A Tropical Rebel Gets the Duke, which is the last book in Adriana Herrera's Los Leones series. Amazing.
Yes.
It's not the queer one, but in that series, there's also an island princess starts a scandal, so everyone should read that and then
Yeah.
read the rest of Los Leones. And I think it's coming out in June as well by Annie Mayer, Cosmic Love at the Multiverse Hair Salon.
I've
What a
heard
great
of that.
title.
I mean, I don't need to say anything else. It's great.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent. Well, Joanna, we don't want to keep you too much longer, so bye. See ya.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, Joanna. You are a delight. It's wonderful seeing you again. It's been a while. Enjoy your time in England. I wish I could be in your class because
Me
just
too.
being next to you, it's like you learn so much. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's been really fun.
Joanna's a sweetheart.
No,
Okay.
she was fun.
And that's our roundup. Watch Romance Roundup on Reader Seeks Romance channel and subscribe on YouTube. Listen to Romance Roundup on PodBean and all podcast apps. Thanks for joining us, romance readers.
Happy reading, everyone.